Close your eyes and imagine you're 11 years old. You live in a booming city. Think of it as the Chicago of the East. One night, the windows in your bedroom don't just rattle, they explode. You peek through the curtains at dawn and see armored cars blocking the intersections. Soldiers with bayonets and German shepherds are kicking down orders. In that moment, you think your life is over. But the reality is much stranger, because a few years later, that same terrified boy won't be a victim. He'll be wearing the invader's uniform. He'll be their voice. In the West, we talk about Vichy France, a government that shook hands with the Nazis just to keep the lights on. The East, there was a place called Manchukuo, and today we're telling the story of. He wasn't a hero, and he wasn't exactly a villain. He was a survivor caught in the gears of a ghost navy, a fleet built for an ocean that didn't exist. Before the tanks rolled in 1931, Cheng's hometown Mukden like the Far East Las Vegas. It was ruled by a flamboyant warlord who handed out silver dollars like candy. Life was simple, catching frogs in the creek and wild up at shows. But then came the September 18th incident. Japan seized the region, and the world changed overnight. Cheng's father lost his prestigious job at a British Benki HSBC. The family fled to Harbin, a city known as the Paris of the Orient because of its beautiful Russian architecture and deep cafe culture. But there's a price for living in an occupied paradise. In school, Japanese became the mandatory tongue. If you tripped over a verb, you got a slap to the face from your teacher, Yang Chu. Cheng Bao realized something early on. Language was his only weapon. At 19, he traded his dignity for a pair of leather shoes and a paycheck of 60 yuan, enough to keep his family of 5 from starving. He became a translator for the river defense fleet. To his neighbors, he was a traitor. To his family, he was the only reason they had brea down on the table. Now, let's talk about this navy. It was called the Jiangshangjun, the River Army. Imagine a massive naval command with admirals in crisp white uniform, MS, but they are stuck in a river. It's like the U.S. Navy setting up a carrier strike, E group, in the middle of the Mississippi. The absurdity was everywhere. You'd see Japanese army officers, total landlubbers, clumping around the decks of warships in heavy muddy boots, looking completely out of place. The fleet was a collection of charter actors, straight out of a Scorsese movie. You had the commander, Yin the Bearded, guy who acted more like a mob boss than an officer, always protecting his rowdy sailors when they got into bar fights host. But the peak of this puppet theater happened in 1941. The last emperor of China, Puyi, came to inspect the fleet. Now, Puyi was supposed to be a living god, a true dragon, but as he stepped onto the pier, he boat rocked. The god king stumbled. He was about to do a faceplant into the mud. Why river water in front of everyone? Guess who caught him? Cheng Bao, the boy who had to hide in the grass, terrified of Japanese bayonets, was now literally holding the emperor of China. It's a perfect metaphor for the era. The regime looked powerful, and divine, but it was so shaky it could be toppled by a gentle wave. As World War I dragged on, the cracks turned into canyons. Cheng started noticing a mysterious Russian officer named Colonel Gosov hanging around the docks. This guy was of a Bond film. He had one of those high-tech fancy lighters, the kind that was actually a miniature camera. He'd stand by the river pretending to smoke, but he was sexually photographing every gun turret and hull. Everyone knew he was a Soviet spy. But here's the kicker. No one arrested him. Why? Because by 1945, the Japanese and our puppets knew the end was coming. They were all looking for an exit strategy. Didn't want to piss off the guy whose friends were about to drive tanks into their sea. When the Soviet Union finally declared war in August 1945, the Ghost Navy evaporated. Cheng Bao watched as his Japanese advisor, a man named Uchida, chose a traditional end, killing his own family before committing seppuku. Other generals, once strutted like kings, were suddenly on the streets, begging to shine shoes or on the way to secret executions. Cheng realized that all the years he spent perfecting his yes-man Japanese and his polite protocol didn't mean a thing in the face. FA Soviet T-34 tank. Cheng Bao eventually changed his name to Zuo Qifeng and lived T. Male 86 years old. He didn't write his memoirs to make himself look like a hero. He wrote them as an act of penance. He wanted us to understand that in extreme times, he grew it rare. Most people are just trying to get a meal, but in doing so, they accidentally become the accomplices of history. The story of the Jiangshangjun is a black and white tale of good versus evil. It's a story of Japanese soldiers who secretly hated the war and of locals who worked for the enemy just to keep their kids fed. Next time you look at a river, remember that beneath the surface lie more than just rusted shipwrecks. There are the lives of the invisible people, the ones swept away by the flood of an era they never asked for. Thanks for watching. If you want more EP dives into the shadows of history, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. I'll see you in the next one.